Rabbis, it's nice to be with you once again. I hope that you've enjoyed the sessions that have come before and found something to take advantage of there. In this session, I'm absolutely positive that that will be the case because we are looking at the wedding ceremony, something that you all spend very important time on because of the centrality of this ceremony, not only to the individuals involved, but to their families, to their friends and community. Here is one of the places where you know better than I what a significant impact you can make. That's the reason that I chose this sugya. I think that we've got an opportunity to study deeply material here in the Gemara relating to the wedding ceremony and to ask what it is that the Gemara might have to teach us that we have not yet appreciated about this ceremony that we engage in so often. Before I begin with you looking at the Gemara, let me emphasize that this is not about marriage as such, although much of what we will say based upon the Gemara relates to Jewish rabbinic opinions of marriage. For marriage, we would have to look at the major part of two tractates, I guess, Ketubot and Kiddushin, both of which have very important things to say about the relationship that we call marriage. But I want to focus very, very narrowly. The ceremony itself, first because of what I just said, that is that this is an occasion which you spend a lot of time participating in and have such a wonderful opportunity to make an important impact. Beyond that, I think that we, and by we I mean teachers in the Jewish community, do not take seriously enough the messages, the communications of ritual as such. What we've got here is a ritual. And there is a history in modernity, actually since the Reformation and into the Enlightenment, of lowering the value of ritual or dismissing the value of ritual by describing it as mere ritual. As far as I'm concerned, there is no such thing as mere ritual, or let me actually state that a little bit better. I want to hope that we will assure that there will be no such thing as mere ritual, but rather that ritual will be appreciated for the commentary it provides to our lives and to the important steps that we take. Because this ritual, as many rituals, and arguably all rituals, but at different levels, serves as a commentary, a participatory commentary, on a major moment of transition. In this case, the transition from being not married to being married. And as ritual, a ritual which involves both actions and many, many words in typical Jewish fashion. The words that I'm referring to here are the blessings themselves, which we know so well. These actions and words together constitute a commentary on the meaning of marriage that I think we have to take very seriously, and I hope you will find is a very important resource there for your conducting of these ceremonies and for the words that you might have to share with couples who are getting married. So let's jump right in. I said on the syllabus that I wanted you to pay particular attention to Rashi. When we look at the so-called Sheva Brachot, the blessings that accompany the wedding and the occasion, the period after the wedding, which we also call Sheva Brachot, that is to say the week during which at meals, under certain conditions, these same blessings will be recited. These words are very, very familiar to us, and I'm quite sure that all of you have your own interpretations, and interpretations that you've been able to teach and people have found great value in. Many of you probably knew Rashi as well, but I want to look at Rashi again more carefully because I think there is a lot of material here, and each time I restudy Rashi on this, I find that I learned something new. After Rashi, I want to step back and look at the broader setting which, according to the Gemara, these blessings are recited in. There is a ritual of wedding which is far broader than what we describe as the ritual of wedding, and I think that that too is a part of the commentary, in this case underappreciated, that we need to be aware of and make a part of our teaching and communications. So I'm going to begin at the very beginning of 7b here in Ketubot and invite you to follow along. please go to the Blackboard discussion in order to have discussion on this, and I look very much forward to your responses and your comments. At the bottom of the page, we've got the direction in the Braita that the Birkat Chatanim should be recited if there is a minyan, asara, for the entirety of the week. That is to say, the week beginning with a wedding and following. These are blessings, obviously, which are recited first, and for our purposes, most importantly, at the wedding itself. Crucially, before we get to the articulation of the blessings, Rav Yehuda adds something that we know from practice. We'll come back to this. That over the course of the week, these blessings are recited only if there are what's called here panim chadashot. That is to say, if there's a new guest. If it's all the same old folks, they've already recited the words, they have already participated in the ritual, celebrated the ritual, and so one would not do this again. This is why it's important, as we know, to bring in new guests over the course of the week. What are the blessings themselves? You know them very, very well. I am not going to review their precise wording. I do have to say that, of course, as in all cases, there are some variations to be found in manuscript versions of this. In my review of it, I think that there's only one significant variation, and it's a variation which frankly doesn't concern us because these are the blessings we recite, and these are the blessings that Rashi had. And so since we're going to pay particular attention to Rashi, I'd like to, for present purposes, concentrate on these and not consider what the alternatives might be. So, Rashi begins by articulating, and this is at the beginning of this whole discussion, that is to say at the bottom of 7b, that he describes that the Seder brachot, the whole ordering and combination of the brachot, the blessings, is not, in fact, devoted to what he calls iskei hazug. This is not entirely devoted to the couple and their new relationship. In his first comment, he says, iskei hazug eno ela me asher yatzar ve'elach. It only begins with the blessing asher yatzar. So in his view, we've got here blessings that focus specifically on the occasion in front of us, but other blessings which combine with them for a particular set of reasons. So what do we have here more particularly? So we have to ask ourselves what comes before the blessings for the wedding proper, and how do those first blessings, which in Rashi's view are not for the wedding proper, create a larger commentary for the meaning of the occasion. If you look in Rashi on 8a, Chet Amud Aleph, about 11, 12, 13 lines down, he begins to discuss the variety of blessings with some specificity and in some depth. There are earlier comments that indicate the specificity. I have particular interest for the first of these blessings, where he jumps in and says, Aval shakol bara lichvodo, the first of the blessings, God created everything for his honor, and to translate specifically. Eina min haseder, as he said before, and as I just indicated, is not part of the order of blessings for the zug, ella la'asefat ha'am. This is a blessing which remarks upon, if you will, celebrates the gathering of the people. Haneasfim sham ligmol chesed, zecher lechasdei chamakom. They've gathered there in order to, true, support the couple, but the words used are gemilut chesed, that this is a gift, as it were, on the part of the community. So the community takes notice first. When a community gathers, a blessing should be recited. The community is gathering for a particular purpose, and therefore other blessings follow. Immediately following the blessing for community, Rashi says, comes Adam Harishon. Adam Harishon is the reference of celebration. This is connection to the first blessing, but it leads immediately to the second and third blessing. So let's look at that very, very carefully. We've got Yotzer HaAdam and Asher Yatzarat Adam Bitsalmo. It will not surprise any of us, and I'm sure many of us have offered commentary here to this effect, that these relate to two different formings, both of those formings of Adam, being the formings or creation of humans in the creation story itself. That is to say, in what we would call Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, if you prefer the references, the creation story of Adam 1 and the creation story of Adam 2. The first of these, Yotzer HaAdam, Rashi says, Tiknuha liyitzira rishona shel Adam harishon. This was set to remark upon, celebrate, I think that is the meaning of blessings here, the formation of Adam harishon. It is not, therefore, he goes on, Einam miseder brachot hazug, birkot hazug, zivug actually says. This is not for the couple because there is not yet a couple, but the hint of couple, of course, is what's crucial here. Because, of course, following Yotzer Adam, we've got Atsher Yatzarat Adam Bitsalmo, which in Rashi's description is Yitzirah Shniya. That is to say, there are two formations, Adam Harishon, without any specification of what that first Adam means, and then the second formation, which is the formation of woman and man separated from one another. I'm very conscious in my language here, because there is in the middle of the Gemara on 8a, which I asked you to prepare, reference to an argument over whether or not the first Adam, the first human being, was designed to begin with as a single being to be separated, or whether that thought should not be noticed in the blessing, and therefore there would be one blessing for Yetzirah. To state that somewhat differently, everyone recognizes that Adam Harishon was created first, everyone here, I mean the rabbis, was created first as a single being. But that single being had both male and female components. Many of you, perhaps all of you, will know of the legendary background of this, elsewhere in the Gemara, the discussion of the androgynous first human being. And the question for the ritual is, do we recite two blessings for the formation of Adam because the initial creation was of a single human, the intent of which, or the purpose of which, was to be separated? Or do we recognize that there are two steps? Is it one blessing or is it two? We recite two, of course, and so the two blessings, according to Rashi's interpretation, come back to the creation of persons, of humans, first in their androgynous quality and then as male and female separated. Of course, when we notice that the first direction, the first focus of the blessings is creation, going back to the very, very beginning, Adam, not Adam, but Adam, person, male and female, who are separated, then, of course, we recognize that this is a ritual which understands a trajectory, which actually defines a trajectory. The trajectory is one where that original human, separated once upon a time, is now coming together again and again and again in the persons of each of the couples whose weddings are being separated. Let me go on. Then there is, of course, here a blessing which sounds like it's talking about a woman. Sos tasis v'tagel akara b'kibbutz baneha latocha b'simcha. Misamech tzion b'vaneha is the way this blessing closes. The imagery, the poetic imagery, is of course the imagery of women who cannot bear children, but we all recognize, both from its biblical source as well as from the closing of the blessing, that this is not about a woman at all, it is about Zion. And Zion who mourns over the loss of her children. Akara, though, is a very, very odd term to be used here. This comes not from Rashi, but it's something that we will all have noticed. In theory, the word akara can not go along with the word banim. If she is akara, if she is barren, she will not have children. And yet here the description is of a barren woman, Zion, who does have children. It anticipates, however, the problem of what comes in the future. Zion mourns. In her mourning, with her children emptied from her, the question is, where will the children come from? Will she remain, as it were, barren, or will there be a future productivity? This too is the promise, of course, of the woman who stands in front of us with her husband shortly to be, who at the moment can be described, again poetically, as akara. She has not yet borne children, as far as this blessing is concerned, but she will quickly serve as the symbol and therefore promise of redemption. Two more blessings follow. One which says Misameach Chatan V'Kala, and the second of which says Misameach Chatan Im Hakala, God causes Chatan and Kala, bride and groom, to celebrate one and the other, and then the second is one with the other. Let's look very, very carefully at what Rashi has to say here. Misameach Chatan V'Kala, he remarks, is lo besimchat chatuna anu omrim, shaharei tfilahi shemitpalim umarachin sheyehu smechim ba'atzlacha kol yamehem. It is less a blessing, he says, the first of these, misameach chatan v'kala, less a blessing than a prayer, that bride and groom should be joyous and fulfilled and have everything they need over the course of their marriage. It is focused specifically on this couple, and it is our prayer for them. That's the first blessing. The second blessing, where he says, where the blessing says, Misameach Chatan Im Hakala, is actually very, very different than that. This is, as he says, a shabeach, mishabeach la'Kadosh Baruch Hu, a blessing or praise, I should say, of God. Shebarach hatunat dibuk ish be'isha al yedei simcha v'chedva. This is a blessing for the joy of the wedding, which the community, which is gathered in the first of the blessings, now has a chance to observe and to celebrate. I believe what we've got here is a very specific trajectory. Rashi has stated it in so many words. I'd like to offer it in my words, and I'm curious to hear your response to this. The community gathers. It recalls the creation of the first Adam, the first human. That is a human who was originally united, who comes to be separated by sex, male and female. We don't yet attend to what happens when they come together, because the crucial transition is Zion, her mourning, her loss, her inability to bear fruit. But that inability to bear fruit quickly turns to our recognition that when man and woman get together, they have the opportunity to find fulfillment. And we pray for that fulfillment. It is a fulfillment of joy one with the other. Needless to say, that joy is not alone in their ability to bear, but of course it resides there as well. Most crucially, it is in simcha in the fullest sense. This is part of Rashi's communication, I believe. That is, that they're gathering together, they're stating faith in the possibility of simcha, itself is a symbol of redemptive promise. Noticing the faith that they have in one another, the prayer that we recite for them, that they should have that joy and that fulfillment, we step back and we praise God for making this joy possible. That's the final blessing. And when we look at its language very carefully, we recognize that it is a blessing which is all about redemption. The wedding, in other words, is the opportunity that we all have in our unredeemed state to notice the possibility, if not literally every day, then in the everyday, that there is faith, there is promise that is genuinely redemptive. That is, I believe, the message of the blessings. But the blessings in a larger context, so let me comment on that very briefly. You will have noticed, going through this text, that there is a ritual for 7 days, including and then following the wedding. There is, according to the Gemara on the bottom of 8a, the beginning of a ceremony and also the extension of a ceremony. Blessings begin before and blessings extend after. Let's do it in that order, even though the Gemara does it in the reverse. The Gemara asks, when do we begin to recite the blessing, Shasimcha b'mono, where we say of God that there is joy in God's dwelling place. And this is part of a ritualized recitation during Birkat HaMazon following the meal. Unfortunately, we've lost this ritual. There is some argument in the Gemara here, but fundamentally it's when you order the beer and wine and liquor. I'm translating, of course, what the Gemara says. When you begin to make concrete preparation for the wedding has begun. It doesn't begin at the moment you gather under the chuppah. It begins, as we all know, long before, and this deserves to be noticed ritually and celebrated. Following the wedding, there is not only the Sheva Brachot, but there is also, as we see here, an extension, and the language is very precise, which goes for Shloshim, right? There is a blessing that will be recited for Shloshim at Birkat HaMazon, that is to say, Shasimcha Bimono, because the Simcha extends. And then, over the course of a full year, if there are new guests invited to celebrate the wedding which took place a month or months before. It will not be beyond anybody's notice that the time periods here parallel exactly the time periods relating to the rituals of death, burial, and mourning. I asked you to look at the next page to prepare these things together because of this connection. There is a preparation for death in ritual, again, a ritual that many of us have forgotten, but an important part of traditional Jewish ritual. There is a Shiva, which, as you see in the Gemara here, and we will discuss more in depth in the next session, a Shiva which includes a meal with special recitations. If they're panim chadashot, if new guests come, then these blessings are recited day after day. That is to say, there is a Sheva Brachot following burial, exactly as there is a Sheva Brachot following the wedding. There is then a Shloshim, and there is then a period of observance for the entire year. The rituals of one and the rituals of the other, while not exactly identical, are very closely parallel. And it is my contention, based upon the scholarship of ritual scholarship, that if there's similar rituals, something related is being said. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is, what is the connection between getting married and passing away that is being declared, claimed in the ritual that defines both of these occasions? It's something that we've all said in one way or the other before, but I think it deserves to be said loudly. There is no doubt, as we will consider in our next session, that death was considered by Chazal, by the rabbis, to be not what we call death, but a transition into a new life. That is to say, someone who passes away is considered to be born into a new life. Precisely the same thing, of course, is understood to be occurring at the wedding. And so the reason, I would argue, that the ritual of the wedding and the ritual of death, burial, mourning is parallel in such profound ways is because both are understood to represent very much the same thing. We are born not once in our lives. We are born at the occasion we all know. There is a ritual for that as well. We are born again when we marry, and from the separated human gather to become one, to become the original human, that with all of its redemptive promise. And of course, we are born again when the end of this life occurs. That's for another discussion, and a very challenging discussion, but I hope that the hint offered in the connection that I've made is one that you find fruitful. We will carry on this conversation in our next session.